Hey people, welcome back to the channel. This is a story in which Naruto meets Kurama in the land of waves and they have a mutual friendship. In this story Naruto shifts toward his mother's side as a Uzumaki seal master. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. Leave a comment if you want to suggest fanfic. Check the description for credits and support the creator of the story. So let us begin. Chapter 42. The Art of Fuinjutsu, Why Am I Not Surprised, said Kurama. That pervert really was just on a research trip, commented Naruto. Naruto and Jiraiya found themselves in Kantona town, a town in the south of the land of hot water and a town known for its many hot spring baths. Hey, Eros Sennin, said Naruto. Jiraiya turned his head to the blonde. Why the hell are we here? I thought we were going to Uzushiogakure. Calm down Naruto. We are, but this town is a nice stop before we take a boat to the island. We'll be here for a few days, so just relax and enjoy yourself, because after this we will pretty much be camping. There is nothing left on the island of the land of whirlpools. Consider these our last few days in civilization before heading out into the wilderness, said Jiraiya. Just admit it you old pervert, you're just here for research, said Naruto. Well, I kind of do have a deadline that I have to meet for the final draft of my next book by the end of the week, admitted Jiraiya. I knew it. We are just on a research trip, shouted Naruto as he began freaking out. You said you were going to teach me Fuinjutsu, but now you're going to be spending all day peeping on girls in the baths. Quiet brat, said Jiraiya, shushing Naruto. I said I would teach you Fuinjutsu and I will, but I also have other things that need to get done. Don't worry, I'm almost done with my book, and all I have to do is finish the ending chapter. It won't take me more than a week. After that, we'll go to Uzu. Besides, you're going to be spending most of this week reading a bunch of scrolls on the basics of Fuinjutsu. What? Reading? Complained Naruto. But I don't want to read. I thought Fuinjutsu was going to be fun and exciting. Jiraiya sighed. It was around this time that they arrived at a bar restaurant to get some food. Listen, Fuinjutsu is complicated. It requires two things to even begin, knowledge and creativity. You already have the creativity aspect, but you still need the knowledge. If you don't know how seals even work, then there is no hope in even learning them. Just read the scrolls one have until you understand the very basics of seals and then I'll help you to learn actual sealing. Okay. But why can't you just teach me everything from the beginning, asked Naruto. Because, this is just something that you have to do. If I just told you everything, I'm afraid it would just go in one ear or out the other ear, or I would forget to say something important, or I would say something out of order. I used those scrolls to teach your father. Besides, if you want to learn Fuinjutsu, it's going to require a lot of studying. This isn't like becoming a master of ninjutsu or genjutsu where you can just repeat the jutsu over and over again until you get it. This is completely different. So just put up with it for the rest of the week, study your scrolls during the day and just relax during the night. After this week, there isn't going to much time to truly relax for the next few weeks, explained Jiraiya. Fine, said Naruto, a little disappointed that he would be stuck basically reading for the next week, but he couldn't help it. He would give the scrolls a chance and then complain to Jiraiya later. The rest of that night, Naruto did as Jiraiya said, relax. They had found a hot springs bath where Naruto was simply relaxing while Jiraiya let's just say his attention was diverted towards other places, particularly the bath on the other side of the divider. The following day, Jiraiya was busy working on the rest of his book while Naruto had finally decided to pick up the scrolls. After all, the sooner he finished them, the sooner he could get back to bugging Jiraiya to actually teach him. Naruto opened up the first scroll and began reading. Scroll 1. What is Fuinjutsu? Fuinjutsu is as its name implies. It is the art of sealing techniques. It is also a very misunderstood art. Most people see Fuinjutsu as simply that, sealing. For the most part, they see it as simply sealing weapons inside scrolls. It however is much more than simply sealing a simple tool inside a scroll. In terms of sealing an object of power within something, a tool being sealed inside a scroll is the simplest form of sealing jutsu. Another simple form of sealing is containing energy within a slip of paper. In other words, these are paper bombs. They contain some sort of energy, usually fire and heat, which is released in an explosive manner when the seal is released. The pinnacle of sealing was seen when beings were sealed within other beings. This was most prominent during the early days of the shinobi world, before the establishment of the great nations and hidden villages. During this period in time, it was common for humans to seal other beings, primarily demons, within themselves so that they could try and tap into the demon's power to enhance their own strength. Early methods of this sealing were unsuccessful as the more powerful demons would usually absorb the consciousness of their human vessel, only becoming more powerful themselves. This trend occurred of the first 500 years of the practice until the sage of the six paths successfully sealed the Jyabi inside himself to prevent it from wreaking havoc on the living world. The sage of the six paths is considered to be the founder of modern-day jutsu and was exceptionally gifted at sealing techniques. However, despite his power, his time eventually came to an end. Out of fear of the Jyabi being released upon his death, the sage used his power to split the Jyabi into 9 parts, creating the 9 biju. For the next 300 years, the practice of sealing demons in humans continued, but no success. It wasn't until the year 341 CE, see note at the end of the chapter, that the sealing of demons proved successful. It was then that the Yonbi was securely sealed into a human. It was at this time where the term Jinchuriki was invented for someone who contained a demon and could tap into its power. This term was given because the human vessel for the demon gave up their prospects for a normal life, but in return they were actually able to tap into the power of the demon sealed within them. Until the year 752 CE, the only successful sealings of demons were the sealing of the biju. The reasons why only the sealing of the biju were successful are still unknown, but it is believed that it was because the biju were considered chakra monsters, that humans were able to tap into their power and contain them more easily, whereas many of the other demons used a different form of energy from chakra to sustain themselves. In the year 752 CE, the attempted sealing of the fox demon known as Hekare failed, resulting in the death of the demon, the first true death of a demon at human hands, particularly the Hoshiruka clan who used to be located in a prominent village northwest of current-day Earth country. Following the failed sealing, the Hoshiruka clan was obliterated by the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the most powerful of the fox demons. Reasons behind this attack are still unknown, but it is believed that the attack was out of retaliation for death of Hekare. Ever since then, the sealing of demons, with the exception of the biju whose sealing has been proven successful, has pretty much stopped to avoid any accidental deaths of more demons and potential war between demons and humans. In the year 973 CE, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the last of the unsealed biju, was finally sealed following the fabled battle between Senju Harashima and Uchiha Madara. Naruto put down the scroll as he felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and regret from within him. However, it wasn't his own emotions. Kurama, is something wrong? I just really wish you wouldn't have read that kit, replied Kurama, trying to keep himself together. Naruto had never seen the Kyuubi like this. It just brought back some painful memories. Huh. Was it concerning your own sealing? I mean, you've never been happy about that, said Naruto. Kit, right now, I could care less about my sealing. At least I survived, but she. What are you talking about? Asked Naruto. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to the first line of the last full paragraph he read. No, you don't mean. I do. Kit, why do you think I attacked the Hoshiruka clan? What did you almost do when you found out that Mutt Boy was responsible for your vixen's injuries? What would you do if you found out someone killed her? She was said Naruto in disbelief. A rare tear came to Kurama's eyes. Yes, Kit, she was my vixen. Kurama, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bring back those memories, apologized Naruto. It's okay, Kit, you didn't know, replied Kurama. Jiraiya had put down his pen and turned around to see Naruto staring off into space. Naruto, is everything alright? Yeah, I just found out something that was kind of hard to take in, said Naruto. Well, why don't we get something to eat? To help get your mind off it. I hear there is a ramen shop in this town, said Jiraiya. Naruto instantly perked up at the mention of ramen. Sadly, this shop wasn't mentioned in his passport. The only ramen shop in his passport was located in the capital of the land of hot water, but the ramen was still pretty flavorful. Following lunch, Naruto resumed reading the first scroll. It didn't contain much more besides a bunch of examples of fuinjutsu, besides actually sealing. Reading the list, a few applications of fuinjutsu that stuck out to Naruto were amplification, transportation, barriers, and even medicine. He hated to admit it, but that first scroll was surprisingly interesting. Naruto put the first scroll aside and picked up the second scroll. Scroll 2. The sealing formulas used in fuinjutsu are comprised of two main components, the central kanjis and sealing matrix. Every seal has these two components and each component serves a vital function of the seal. The central kanjis is what gives the seal its identity. It is the central kanji that distinguishes a storage seal from an amplification seal and an explosive seal from a containment seal. While these are usually written as kanji, it is possible to use symbols as kanji, if one is skilled enough to incorporate them into the seal. The use of symbols in place of kanji usually results in making the seal more powerful, but it requires a much more complex sealing matrix to be explained later in this scroll. Some seals may even contain multiple kanji or symbols. These seals are considered the most advanced form of fuinjutsu as they must perform multiple functions to achieve a single purpose. The seal matrix is also much more complex than a seal with a single central kanji or symbol as the matrix has to connect and integrate multiple kanji. The sealing matrix is a series of interconnected symbols and characters that serve to manipulate the chakra present in the seal so that it can perform the designated function of the seal. The sealing matrix can perform multiple functions, including moving chakra throughout the seal, enforcing the seal to make it stronger, manipulating the chakra to perform an appropriate function, and much more. Every seal needs those two components to function. Without one, the other cannot function. With only a central kanji, the seal knows what function it needs to perform, but it does not contain any of the tools to perform said function. With only the sealing matrix, the seal has the tools to do what it needs to do, but it doesn't know what it needs to do. Ellipsis. Naruto continued reading through this scroll and even reread it. So much for getting through it quick and bugging Ero Sennin to actually teach him. He started on the third scroll, which was a scroll explaining the theory behind the storage seals, until Jiraiya got up and they went to dinner. Naruto had no idea that he had been reading those scrolls all afternoon. He couldn't believe it. This fuinjutsu was actually interesting and he didn't even care if it meant reading a dozen or so scrolls on the subject before he could even begin training. Jiraiya just told him that it must be something he was meant to do, like it was in his blood. In a way, it made sense as he was the son of two great seal masters. The rest of the week was spent with Naruto reading over the rest of the scrolls. The remaining 10 or so scrolls that Naruto had focused on some of the more common types of seals: storage, explosion, barrier, amplification, sealing, and seal removal. The last few scrolls were dedicated more onto explaining how to design the seal itself, primarily how to design the matrix and the components required to get the seal matrix to perform the proper operations. Evenings were spent with Naruto trying to track down Jiraiya at whichever hot spring bath he was in, followed by Jiraiya up late at night trying to finish his book. The last night they were supposed to stay there came and Jiraiya was busy freaking out how he was still missing the last dozen or so pages of his book. He had been up for the past 50 hours trying to figure something out until he finally collapsed from exhaustion. Naruto looked over at his exhausted master and sighed before walking through the sea of crumpled up papers on the floor. Naruto then took the last few pages Jiraiya had written in the manuscript and read them. Unlike Jiraiya, ideas flooded into his head and he began writing what he thought was a suitable ending to Jiraiya's book, including a small adult scene that wrapped up the next Ika. Well, he had to have some idea on what was going on in the adult scene. After all, he's been hanging around Jiraiya for the past few months and he invented the sexy jutsu. This was not a good week for Sasuke's fangirls. He had been hospitalized almost a month ago after sustaining injuries from when Orochimaru had tried to abduct him. Tsunade had tried her best to keep that quiet, but word surrounding the truth of the ill-fated mission spread too fast for her to control. Before she knew it, the entire village knew that Sasuke and his team were ambushed by Freaky Sound Ninja. But what really made things worse was that earlier in the week, he had just disappeared from the village. Usually, the fangirls were able to track Sasuke down after a few hours. Some of the shinobi fangirls even used some ninjutsu they knew to facilitate in finding him, like Ino using her mind transfer jutsu to take over a hawk's mind to search for Sasuke from an aerial perspective. However, they had no luck at all. Rumors began spreading between them that Sasuke had either died from his injuries or had run off to join some pedophile who liked to play with snakes. These rumors were mainly started by boys who had gotten tired of all the girls in the village fawning over Sasuke. Regardless, there were a few fangirls who accepted these rumors and then they spread like wildfire. The only Sasuke fangirl who wasn't freaking out was Sakura. Despite her noticing Sasuke missing, she had also noticed an absence of a particular silver-haired Jonin. She was smart enough to deduce that Kakashi-sensei had to have taken Sasuke on some sort of training trip. Besides, she would see him in a few months when Team 7 reconvened before the Chunin exams. As a matter of fact, Sakura didn't even have time to worry about Sasuke. She had begun her training with Tsunade in full and she was already being drilled on chakra control exercises, human anatomy, poisons and antidotes, and anything medicine. For her, it was pretty much 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. studying and learning the basics of medical ninjutsu. On the days that Tsunade had given her a break, or at least let her go home early, Shizune had offered to teach her how to fight with poisoned Senbon. Sakura saw the value to this, thinking it would make her that much more useful in the upcoming Chunin. A few days, Sakura was even lucky to run into Haku who, after being asked, agreed to help Sakura learn to throw Senbon in combat. Yesterday, Haku and Sakura had a sparring session where they fought each other using only Senbon. Needless to say, Sakura looked like a mix between a human and a porcupine afterwards. She was just happy Haku had used some duller Senbon so that they didn't pierce as deep. Regardless, her skills with the Senbon were showing improvement after her first week out of the hospital and it was only a matter of time before she was able to use them proficiently in combat. For Hinata, it was a lonely week. She had been in Konoha for most of the week as her team had not been given many mission assignments. Normally, that wouldn't be a bad thing, if Naruto were here. Instead, she was stuck in Konoha with just her father and family. Neji had been assigned to a mission and while she didn't mind being at home, there was still a great deal of tension between her and Hanabi from their most recent spar. She was at the training grounds right now, trying her best to work on her wind chakra manipulation. It was early morning and her father had some business with the clan to deal with before he could focus time on training with her. Ever since after the Chunin exams, she actually liked training with her father as he was becoming more open and less harsh. The one thing that did trouble her a little was that he was still training her in the Juken, which she was finding more and more uncomfortable the more she advanced with it. Neji was right, she wasn't well suited for the Juken due to her wind nature. Taking the next kunai, she held it, working on channeling her chakra. She really wanted to get through this step as she would then be able to begin the next part of her training which her father had mentioned would be to incorporate her wind chakra into the Juken. His personal hopes for her were that a wind-enhanced Juken would result in a much more powerful strike. If he was right, this could finally get the elders off Hinata's back for a while. Despite her progress, everyone else in the main branch still saw Hinata as weak and unworthy. He figured it was because they saw that Hanabi had much more potential in the Juken and is the Hyuga clan heir than Hinata and saw training her as a waste of time that could have been better spent on Hanabi. As a father, he hated how the rest of the family was playing favoritism towards Hanabi, which was the main cause behind this superiority-inferiority complex that Hinata, Hiyashi, and Neji were afraid she was developing. Hinata focused her chakra into the knife, taking a few extra seconds to try and refine it as best as she could before tossing the knife. The kunai left her hand, sailing towards the training post she was using. A crack was heard and Hinata examined her result. The knife had sailed clean through the post, embedding itself in the ground behind the post. She had done it. This phase of wind manipulation was complete. Jiraiya let out a big yawn. Damn it, I fell asleep. And I've only got a few hours left before I have to send the manuscript to my publisher for editing and publishing. What makes it worse is I still don't have any idea what to write, said Jiraiya. He then took a look at the blank pieces of paper in front of him, only to realize they weren't blank. Sitting in front of him was the completed final chapter of the book, but it wasn't written by him. This is. Jiraiya took a look over the chapter sitting in front of him. It definitely wasn't his handwriting on the paper, but it was familiar handwriting. He took a look at the paper and then to the sleeping blonde in the next room. No, it couldn't be. Naruto couldn't have finished it, thought Jiraiya. Well, let's see what the brat wrote. If anything, it will give me a good laugh. Jiraiya spent the next 20 minutes reading over the manuscript. He hated to admit it, but it was good. Even the small adult part that was included was good. The chapter was just lacking some constancy with the rest of the book, but that was easy enough to change. He had an idea now on how to write the last chapter and he began writing, using Naruto's ideas, but just adjusting them to better fit the story. However, he didn't notice that said boy had woken up and was looking over his shoulder. "Aro Sennin!" shouted Naruto, making Jiraiya jump. "Brat! Don't do that," replied Jiraiya. "Now go get ready because we are leaving after I finish writing the last chapter." Naruto sighed as he walked off to go pack his stuff. I guess he didn't need my help writing that after all, thought a slightly depressed Naruto. He had thought what he had written was good and was hoping for some form of acknowledgement from Jiraiya. A bit later, Naruto came out of the room, everything packed in another of the Fuinjutsu scrolls read. Jiraiya was busy now sealing up the envelope that contained the manuscript for his next book, Ika Ika Violence. Jiraiya looked up at the boy. "Hey Naruto, thanks. It really helped me get over that writer's block," said Jiraiya, holding up the envelope with the manuscript. "You know, if you ever decide to give up on your dream to become Hokage, I'm sure you could make a good adult novelist." Naruto knew Jiraiya had actually used his work now, but that still didn't mean he was happy about Jiraiya suggesting he should write more Ika Ika books. "Oh, don't worry Naruto, it's only a matter of time before you come over to the dark side of the perv," thought Jiraiya, grinning. The two left Cantona town shortly after checking out of the town and mailing the manuscript to the publisher. Jiraiya had to admit he was surprised that Naruto had actually taken to the scrolls on Fuinjutsu that he had given him. He was honestly expecting the blonde to have started bugging him by the end of day 2, but instead Naruto had only asked for a few examples of seals to look over. Regardless of that, their next stop was the port city of Shikuzima, their last stop before the ruins of Uzumaki. It was late in the evening when they arrived. The sun was already beginning to set and they were standing on a cliff overlooking the port and ocean. Jiraiya pulled out his spyglass that he would normally use for peeping but aimed its gaze off into the ocean. "Hey Naruto, take a look over in that direction," said Jiraiya, handing Naruto the spyglass and pointing off towards a distant island in the ocean. He couldn't make out too much of the island except for what looked like an old run-down pier and a few whirlpools surrounding the island. "Is that?" asked Naruto. "Yep. Uzumaki," said Jiraiya. Naruto couldn't believe it. He was almost there, almost at the home of his ancestors. "Alright, let's go. Get to bed early because we've got to leave early. We need to pass the reefs surrounding the island tomorrow between 1 and 3 in the afternoon or we risk getting sucked into the whirlpools that surround the island," said Jiraiya. Naruto gulped a little at the thought of getting sucked into a whirlpool but went with Jiraiya to the town anyways. "Hey Aro Sennin, so when are you actually going to start teaching me Fuinjutsu? I mean like actually teach me. I've already read the scrolls over a few times and I think I get them. I don't know why. I never really liked reading scrolls and stuff during the academy, but for some reason these were interesting," said Naruto. "Hey, well it's good that you finally began to read some stuff. As to why you actually like the subject, it could be because you come from a long line of seal masters, not to mention your dad was one of the best there ever was. As for when I'll begin teaching you, we'll start when we get to the island tomorrow. I've made arrangements for a few fishermen to get us through the reefs tomorrow and then pick us up about 3 weeks later. That should give us ample time to find something that could help my task of finding a way to remove the caged bird seal and to teach you some of the basics in Fuinjutsu. Sound good?" asked Jiraiya. "Can't wait to get started." "Tabeo," declared Naruto. "Gah. That bastard. He'll pay for doing this," cried Orochimaru in one of his hideouts. He was sitting in his throne with bandages around the stumps he had for arms after a sage-powered Rasengan practically tore them off Orochimaru. "Orochimaru-sama, please settle down," said Kabuto. How can I? Not too long after I regain the function of my arms, that bastard of a teammate Jiraiya rips them off again, hissed the snake. Please Orochimaru-sama. Kabuto was cut off. Shut up Kabuto, unless you have a way to give me back my arms, shouted Orochimaru. Well, I don't right now, but I think I know who does, or did, have a way to grow back body parts, said Kabuto. Orochimaru knew Kabuto well enough to know what he was talking about. You're talking about the Uzumakis aren't you? Asked Orochimaru. Yes Orochimaru-sama. If anyone knows how to design a regeneration seal, it's them. With your permission, I would like to take an expedition with me to see what we can recover, said Kabuto. Also, I'm going to need her. You see, I don't think I'm going to be able to access the information without her. She can be quite a handful, you know that Kabuto. But nonetheless, if it will get me my arms back, then I'll allow it. You have 2 weeks, said Orochimaru. After that, I expect you to get right to work giving me my arms back. Chapter 43. The ancient city of the Uzumakis. Naruto couldn't believe it. He was finally there, the village of his mother's ancestors. The village itself was in ruins, but he had kind of been expecting that. However, based on the ruins, he could tell that Uzushiogakure used to be a great and powerful village. Jiraiya guided the two of them over to a collapsed building just outside the center of the village which he decided would make for a good base camp. He went around, putting a few barrier seals up, providing them protection. While it wasn't a common occurrence, there were occasionally bandits who would come to the island and try to loot anything valuable that may have been in the ruins. Despite that, Jiraiya was still confident that they had not managed to break into the archives of the village, which is where he suspected the clan scrolls the Uzumakis had were being stored, under the protection of blood seals. No one without Uzumaki blood was going to get into the clan scrolls, and thankfully for him, Naruto was an Uzumaki. So Ero Sennin, what are we going to do first? Asked Naruto. Are we going to get the Uzumaki scrolls, or are you going to teach me Fuinjutsu? All of the sudden, Naruto's stomach began to growl and Jiraiya laughed. We'll start examining the scrolls tomorrow. Let's grab a bite to eat and I'll teach you a few things as well, said Jiraiya, taking a scroll from his pack and unraveling it to reveal a seal on it. Alright, so what type of seal do I have on here? It looks like a storage seal, but I don't know what those markings around the center are, said Naruto. I guess he has been reading the scrolls a bit. That's not exactly a standard center for a storage scroll, thought Jiraiya. Well, you're partially right. It is a storage seal, but it's also a preservation seal. Jiraiya released the seal and much to Naruto's delight a few bowl of ramen poofed into existence. After taking a few slurps of ramen, Naruto was surprised that they were still warm. Wow, I can't believe this ramen is still fresh, said Naruto, finishing off the first bowl and moving on to the second one. That's the preservation seal for you. It's not permanent preservation, but it's good enough to keep a few bowls of ramen fresh for a couple of days, said Jiraiya. Naruto then moved on to the third bowl, and the fourth bowl, well it looks like they weren't having any more ramen during the trip. Jiraiya then went into explaining the basics on how to make a storage seal, starting with the simplest storage seal, and he would eventually go into the more advanced storage seals, like the preservation storage seal he used on the ramen. It was getting late in the night and the two were about ready to turn in for the night. However, Jiraiya wanted to have a little fun with the blonde. Hey Naruto, about the last chapter of the book you wrote, thanks. Oh, yeah. I just thought it was the least I could do, after everything you've done for me, said Naruto. What do you mean by that? Asked Jiraiya. Well you know, everything. From training me back in the Chunin exams, to coming to get me once you figured it was Orochimaru that sent us on that mission, to telling me about my parents, and even teaching me Fuinjutsu. No one's ever really done that much for me. You know, you might be an old perv, but you're pretty cool at times, admitted Naruto. Jiraiya smiled warmly upon Naruto saying that. Thanks Naruto. So does this mean you'll stop calling me, Ero Sennin? Nope, said Naruto without any hesitation. Jiraiya's head dropped in defeat. I just call them as they are, and even if you are a cool ninja, you're still just a perverted old sage. HMPH, says the boy who wrote a perfectly good adult sex scene and invented the sexy jutsu, said. Jiraiya. If I didn't know better, you're a perv as well. What? refuted Naruto. I'm not a perv. Then answer this. When you saw Hinata in that dress, what were you thinking? I'll bet it was something perverted, said Jiraiya, getting that perverted look on his face. Naruto's face instantly went red and he began sweating profusely as he searched for a not-so-perverted answer. Well, you see, check-in mate. I'm sorry Kit, he's got you there, replied Kurama, getting a laugh out of it. Gahahaha, alright, that's enough messing with you for one night, Arogaki, said Jiraiya, flustering Naruto. Hey. Who are you calling perverted, Aro Sennin? At least I don't go wandering into women's bathhouses, replied Naruto. Sure, whatever you say, said Jiraiya, as he crawled in his sleeping bag. I doubt you've never snuck into a woman's bathhouse to invent that wonderful jutsu from Kami. Whoa, exclaimed Naruto. Jiraiya and Naruto had come to what the Uzumakis had called the Hall of Sealing, the place where they had stored all of their knowledge on sealing techniques. They were standing in the middle of a large domed structure with the only light coming through a hole in the ceiling. However, through a careful arrangement of mirrors, the light managed to illuminate the entire hall. Hey Aro Sennin, what are all these compartments? Asked Naruto. Looking around the circular room, he could see the walls lined with various compartments. Oh those. You see, every Uzumaki family had their own notes and techniques on sealing. While a lot of their techniques were common knowledge amongst the clan, every member had a few seals and techniques that were unique to their family. Think of it as a time capsule, said Jiraiya. This room was built underground and protected by a number of barriers that we already came through, which is why his room is still intact despite the entire village being in ruins. Cool. Do you think any of them are mine? Said Naruto. Well, it really depends on your ancestors. Those lockers have blood seals on them that are designed to open with the blood of a descendant of the person on the locker. Usually lines concentrate their lockers around each other, so there may be a chance there is more than one locker if your ancestors left multiple lockers, explained Jiraiya. Alright, their archives are over there, beyond those doors. However, I need you to open the doors for me. Right, replied Naruto. Jiraiya and Naruto made their way across the room to the double doors, with Naruto unlocking the blood seals on the archives. Now, I'll be in here researching for a little, said Jiraiya, catching the look on Naruto's face. And it's not that kind of research. Now, why don't you go and see if you see open any of those lockers? You know what to do, just smear some of your blood on the locker. If the seal opens, then it's yours. Let me know what you find. Oh good, you're here, said Kakashi, reaching the top of a cliff. I've been here for nearly 2 hours, said a slightly irritated Sasuke. Well, you see there was this little bird that needed my help. Just can it, said Sasuke. Kakashi chuckled. Kind of like last time, isn't it? Asked Kakashi. Yeah. Although there is more on this cliff than the one we camped out during the exams, said Sasuke. The last time, they were on top of a small bluff overlooking a barren wasteland. This time, it was more of a high cliff overlooking a forest that they had decided to camp out on. So what are we doing this time? Glad you asked. We'll be here for a little more than a month before heading back to Konoha and leaving for the exams. And while we're here, you'll be needing these, said Kakashi, pulling out a few weights from his pack. Are those? Well, kind of. Lee just had training weights on. These are chakra weights. Put them on and I'll explain, instructed Kakashi. Sasuke put the weights on, which felt like nothing. Once they were secured onto his arms and legs, Kakashi smiled and activated a seal. Sasuke was instantly thrown to the ground. The weights had to weigh at least 500 pounds each. What the hell? Swore Sasuke. Those are chakra weights. Right now, they weigh 400 pounds each. However, they were designed to have their weight reduced to only 10% if you constantly floated chakra into them. One problem you have is your chakra capacities are lacking. While you'll never be Naruto level when it comes to chakra reserves, training with these on will certainly help you build them up, explained Kakashi. Sasuke tried putting some chakra into the weights and struggled to get himself up. It took a few minutes, but he finally got the amount of chakra to balance out and he could move with a little bit more ease. He looked over to see that Kakashi had the same thing on. What? You didn't think you were the only one training, were you? Wait, you train? I thought all you did was read those books and walk around looking for old ladies and cats to help out, said Sasuke, making fun of Kakashi's excuses for being late. Nope. I train as well. Besides, if I didn't train with you, then you would probably surpass me in skill in a year or two, and I can't let that happen, now can I? Said Kakashi, smiling. Sasuke smirked, knowing his teacher wasn't all that lazy. For Sasuke and Kakashi, a few days passed. This was mainly physical conditioning and Kakashi trying to build up Sasuke's stamina and chakra reserves. Whenever Sasuke began getting frustrated with this, a simple phrase like, Naruto would have run 10 laps around you by now, was usually sufficient to get Sasuke back on his feet. By the end of their first week, Sasuke could already feel the increase in stamina he had from wearing those weights, not to mention he had noticed an increase to his speed as well. Perhaps Lee had something going for him using those training weights. Not to brag or anything, but I told you before that I know over 1,000 jutsu, said Kakashi. Sounds like bragging to me, muttered Sasuke, quiet enough for Kakashi not to pick up on it. Anyways, I'll be teaching you as many of them as we can do. Now, as I said last time we did this, your primary element is lightning with our second element being fire. I know the extent of your fire jutsu and I happen to know the lightning variant to your Kaden, dragon fire jutsu, explained Kakashi. He took out a few wired shuriken and tossed them at a tree, wrapping the cords around the tree. Raiden, lightning dragon jutsu. Electricity and sparks traveled down the wires just as the fire did in his dragon fire jutsu. Jolts of electricity were sent through the tree, splintering it, until it eventually broke. I need to remember to bring Tenzo with me next time if we don't want to run out of trees. Sasuke followed Kakashi's lead, throwing a set of wired shuriken at a tree. He then proceeded to channel lightning chakra into the wires. The electricity traveled down the wires and into the tree, splintering it, but not breaking it, like Kakashi's tree had done. Not bad for a first attempt, said Kakashi. That was better than my first attempt at it, but even with your Sharingan, you may be able to copy a jutsu to the point where you can use it, but you're not going to master a jutsu the first time you use it. Naruto was getting frustrated. He had spent nearly the past 2 hours going through lockers. He was starting to get to the end of the lockers, and so far, nothing. Grr, why won't these stupid lockers open? I've already shown that I really am an Uzumaki by getting arrow senin through the blood seals, now why won't these stupid lockers open, shouted Naruto. Oh. Having any luck there? Asked Jiraiya, joining Naruto. No. None of these stupid lockers want to open, said Naruto, slamming a slightly bloody hand into another locker. This time, the seal glowed and disappeared. Hey. There you go, said Jiraiya. Taking a look on the door, the plaque read, Hiro Uzumaki. Why do I recognize that name? The excited Naruto opened the door to see what was in this vault. Inside were a few scrolls, a framed picture and what looked like a letter. Naruto picked up the picture and saw a man standing next to a woman who closely resembled his mother. In the mother's arms was a small baby wrapped in blankets. The woman had the same long red hair as his mom, but her eyes were a little too narrow to be his mother. The man standing next to her was also a red-haired man. His hair was shorter and a little spiky. He looked to be wearing some sort of shinobi gear. His face was more defined than his mom, but he noticed that his eyes were the same as his mother's. Naruto picked up the letter, wondering what it said. My dearest daughter, Kushina, I hope you have grown up well into a strong and beautiful woman like your mother. I sincerely wished we could have seen you once more, but with the combined forces of Iwagakure and Kusagakure on our doorsteps, it will be a miracle if we see you again. I have sent you to Kanahagakura, our sister village, for your protection. Should you ever find your way back to the great city of your ancestors and come across this letter, know that your mother and I have always loved you. Love, Hiro Uzumaki and Heiasu Uzumaki, your mother and father, these were, said Naruto almost speechless. Looks like they were your grandparents, Naruto, said Jiraiya, placing his hand on Naruto's shoulder. Here, this will make it easier finding the rest of your lockers. Jiraiya had taken one of the more ornate scrolls from the locker to find that it was actually a family tree. They found the next locker a few lockers below the one that belonged to Naruto's grandparents. According to the family tree, this belonged to Naruto's great-grandfather, Morio Uzumaki. Again, inside the locker, he found a number of scrolls and this time a rather unique forehead protector. This one had the Uzumaki spiral carved in it. Buried deep in the back was also what was a bound red and black book. After taking a quick look through it, Jiraiya realized that it was a book of highly advanced seals, the ones that the Uzumakis were famous for. The next name on the tree was the one that was most surprising to Jiraiya, and given the book of sealing techniques they found in the last locker only gave more credit to the possibility of what he was thinking being true. The next name on the tree read, Shuichi Uzumaki, Naruto's great-great-grandfather. They found the locker a few lockers over and Naruto placed his blood on the seal while Jiraiya was busy holding his breath, turning purple when Naruto felt the urge to scratch his back before opening the locker. Just open it already, shouted Jiraiya, releasing all the air that he had held in his lungs. Geez, why are you in such a hurry? Got a hot spring that needs researched? Asked Naruto. Just open the locker. I need to know something right now, said Jiraiya. Naruto sighed at his impatient master and placed his hand on the seal. The seal glowed before dispelling and Jiraiya's jaw nearly dropped. Naruto opened the locker and his jaw dropped along with his master's. Sitting inside the locker was a quadrilateral cage hat with the Uzumaki insignia on it. Ero Sennin? Asked Naruto. He really wanted to know now, was his great-great-grandfather a kage? Well, what do you know? Looks like you're related to two cages, Naruto, said Jiraiya as Naruto's eyes widened. Shuichi Uzumaki was the Shidaime Uzukage and the one who made the founding alliance with the Senjus and Konoha in the beginning days of the villages. He was also one of the best seal masters of his time, which explains the book his son had in his locker, explained Jiraiya. Naruto then did what was expected as he grabbed the old cage hat from the locker and placed it on his head. There were a few tears and smudges, but what else did you expect of a 100-year-old hat? What was under the hat made Naruto's eyes grow wider, if that was even possible without his eyes taking up all of his head. Underneath the hat was a katana with a black hilt wrapped in red bindings in a black sheath with a red wave-like pattern. At the end of the hilt was the Uzumaki icon. Naruto unsheathed the sword and it was brilliant. He didn't know much about swords but even he could tell it was an exceptional piece of craftsmanship. Hey, if that's what I think it is, then what a find, said Jiraiya. Huh. Wait, what? You know more about this, said Naruto. The Uzumaku Shio no Ken, Sword of the Swirling Tides, I believe. It's about as famous in the shinobi world as the Nadaime Hokage's Raijin. It was thought lost when the city was destroyed. Who would have thought that it would be here in the archives and that a little brat like you would be the one to find it, laughed Jiraiya. Wow. Really? What makes it so famous? Asked Naruto, jumping up and down, nearly knocking the hat off his head. I really can't say. Not too much is known about that sword, but the legends say it ranks right up there with the Raijin and the Seven Swords of the Mist, so it must have some kind of special power or something, said Jiraiya. But still, what a day it has been. Who would have thought that you would be directly related to the Shidaime Uzukage and find this old sword? Hey, Ero Sennin, does that mean you'll teach me how to use a sword? Asked the already excited Naruto. Well, you see I'm not so much of a sword expert, said Jiraiya. Oh come on. What's the real reason you won't teach me? It'll take up too much of your research time, said Naruto. Gah, said Jiraiya, coughing in response to Naruto's comment. In all honesty though, I'm no sword expert. Although I think I might be able to pull a few strings with the toads. Some of them are rather skilled in kenjutsu. Naruto was so happy as he and Jiraiya returned back to their camp. He had his hat full with scrolls and that journal they found. Unfortunately, he was a little too happy that he didn't notice one of the scrolls fall out from the hat and roll underneath a pile of rubble. When they got back to the camp, Jiraiya basically went through all the scrolls they found. Some were sealing scrolls, some were kenjutsu and taijutsu scrolls that detailed the Uzumaki style in each discipline, and then there was one scroll titled, The Treasure of the Uzumaki. Naruto couldn't resist as he undid the seal on that scroll. Releasing the seal, a small black book popped into existence. Naruto opened the book to see what was so special about it. Yada was heard all across the elemental nations, especially in Konoha. Many people there recognized the voice. Hey, was that Naruto? Asked Sakura. A few of the Konoha 13, Team 8, Team 10, and Sakura, were at the training ground sparring with one another when they heard the scream. Sure sounded like it, replied Kiba. Even when he's not in Konoha, he still finds a way to make a scene. So what do you think he did this time? Asked Ino. I don't know, knowing Naruto it was probably some stupid or perverted jutsu, said Sakura. Hinata, who was there as well, went red with the mention of perverted jutsu. Her Naruto would never do something like that, would he? Have some faith in your comrade, said Shino, startling most of the genin there. He probably just mastered an amazing technique. Well, I heard Master Jiraiya mention something about sealing and fuinjutsu. I think he got past a important stage in fuinjutsu, said Hinata. Naruto. Fuinjutsu. Ino said, having an incredibly difficult time connecting the dots. Nah, he probably devised some way to prank the village, said Kiba. At this time Shikamaru and Choji got done discussing something with one another. You're all wrong, and Choji and I have 100 ryo that says you're, said Shikamaru coming forth. Fine, Mr. Smarty Pants, said Ino. The remaining 4-5 genin there accepted the bet as well, even sweet little Hinata. So, what do you think it was? It's troublesome really, but there is only one thing Naruto gets that excited about, said Shikamaru. Everyone else was listening in for Shikamaru and Choji's answers. Munch, ramen, munch, said Choji in between handfuls of chips. In about a month time, Shikamaru and Choji would be a couple hundred ryo richer as it did indeed have something to do with ramen. Naruto had just hit the jackpot. The treasure of the Uzumaki was none other than a collection of about a dozen special ramen recipes. He couldn't wait to get back home and see if Teuchi could whip up a few bowls of this. A few weeks passed with the general day looking something like Jiraiya would be in the library researching and he would be teaching Naruto the basics of designing seals. Naruto would try to make a seal, test it, and watch as it blew up in his face. As an end result, Naruto would get a little frustrated and Jiraiya would get a laugh. Something encouraging would be said to Naruto and Naruto would laugh along with Jiraiya. It had taken about 2 weeks of dedicated practice before Naruto finally succeeded in making his own working storage seal. Jiraiya figured that they would celebrate that night by breaking out the remaining ramen he had sealed away. It wasn't as good as the first time they had ramen, but the preservation seals had done enough to keep the ramen still tasting good. Don't worry Naruto. The hard part was making that first seal, but now that you know how to do that, storage seals should be no problem. You know how to make the central components for the seal and the rest is just adding on, said Jiraiya, giving his student some encouragement. The rest of that week was spent with Jiraiya finishing up the research and Naruto continuing to practice the storage seals. He was showing much improvement with the storage seals and now it was only a matter of time and practice before he had the concepts of storage seals mastered. The same could not be said for Jiraiya's project. For 3 weeks, he had been sorting through countless scrolls on seal removal and various other things, only to come up with nothing so far. Nothing that could remove the caged bird seal without killing the original bearer. It wasn't until late in the evening on December 29th, the day before the fishermen were scheduled to pick them up and they would return to Konoha, that Jiraiya finally found something. The funny thing was that it was not a scroll on seal removal, it was a scroll on a certain type of medical seal. However, this seal worked along the lines of cell preservation and regeneration. Perhaps if this could be applied to the removal seal, the deaths of the neurons brain cells could be prevented when the caged bird seal was removed. This would definitely be something he and Tsunade would have to look over when they got back. But Jiraiya smiled nonetheless. He was finally over his sealer's block that had stopped his progress on finding a way to remove it and his brain had begun clicking. Again with ideas on how to get rid of that accursed seal. Naruto, let's go, said Jiraiya. Naruto, in the middle of scribing his own storage seal lifted his head. Did you find something that can help, Ero Sennin? Asked Naruto. I think so. I'm going to need Tsunade's help with this one though. Let's head back to camp and get packed, the boat will be here for us early tomorrow morning, said Jiraiya. They left the archives with Naruto trotting along ahead, thinking of what everyone would say when they saw his amazing sealing talents. It was then that he felt a tug on his jacket collar as Jiraiya quickly pulled the blonde behind the crumbled wall of an old building. Hey, Ero Sennin what? Naruto was interrupted when Jiraiya put his hand over Naruto's mouth. Shish, he gestured, pointing over to a few people walking through the ruins. Naruto could see that they were ninja. When one of the ninja turned their head, He could easily see which village they were affiliated with. Sound.